Hey YouTubers, Muskrat Jim here, and today I want to talk about The Alone Show, Season 2, Episodes 7, 8, and 9. So stay tuned. Okay, so the big surprise in Episode 7 was that Mike tapped out. He had been doing so well, and I thought he was a contender to stay all the way. But, alas, in Episode 7, he felt that he was like on a vacation, but without his wife Barbara. And Mike's relationship with Barbara is just like that, you know. He really enjoys the company of his wife, and I'm sure the feeling is mutual. So anyway, it was time. It was time to go back to Barbara. So I wish them both the best of luck in the future. Now, at the end of Episode 6, we saw Randy struggling with his isolation. He was really missing the companionship of another human being. So, in Episode 7, what he did is he built a small little sweat lodge out of some saplings and tarps, built a fire, and heated up some rocks where he could pour water on them and create a sauna-like environment in the sweat lodge. Now, North American natives, historically they've used sweat lodges to cleanse the mind, the body, and the spirit, to elevate themselves to, another level, almost another level of consciousness. So anyway, Randy had, this really important decision to make, whether to stay or whether to leave. And so he thought that the sweat lodge would help clear his mind so that he could make the right decision. So, after a few hours in the sweat lodge, he emerged and he had made his decision. The decision to go home, to spend time with people. So his decision wasn't based on the fact that he had lost his ferro rod like several episodes earlier. He managed to stay there without his ferro rod and make fire from primitive methods. And, his performance was nothing less than stellar. I know for myself, if I was in a remote location like that, and I suddenly lost my ability to easily make fire, that would be a deal breaker for me. There's no way that I could stay there without fire. And my success with primitive fire, well, I haven't had any success with primitive fire, to be quite honest. And that's in this environment, which isn't a rainforest, constantly wet, damp environment. So I definitely salute Randy in his efforts, and I'm sure he'll do well with his survival school down in Arizona and anything else he puts his hand to. Now, Justin had been doing so well up until Episode 7. In the morning, at 2 o'clock in the morning, on day, well, it must have been close to day 20, 21, in around there, he found his sleeping bag soaking wet. And upon further inspection, he discovered that his fire pit that he had dug within his shelter had 6 inches of water in it. So he had inadvertently built in a catch basin, or on a swamp where the water level would rise. as the rains came. So that was a terrible outcome for him, very disheartening. Oh yeah, I meant to say that when he discovered his camp had been swamped, he used his hammock as a sleeping platform. So it is a good thing that he did bring a hammock after all. But he vowed to stay on until day 22, because day 22 was a significant milestone for him. Significant in the fact that he wanted to call attention to the 22 servicemen and women who commit suicide in the States every day. That's a terrible situation. He wants, well, the whole reason that Justin came on the Alone Show was to show other veterans by his example that if you put your mind to it, yes you can. You know, there's always that hope. You know, suicide is not the answer. And anyway, near his camp, there was a mountain, and it was 1,300 feet high. So on day 22, he made it his mission to climb that mountain, to reach the summit, to prove to the veterans like himself that yes, you can. So during his preparations, he was boiling water because he was going to need water for his journey. And just as the water started to simmer, sure enough, just like David, the pot tipped and spilled into his fire. So, you know, that set him back a little bit, because it takes a lot of energy. Like when you're not eating well, it takes a lot of energy to collect firewood, to start a fire, to collect water, and then to get it to boil. That's a daily need. Anyway, he was able to overcome that, and he managed to climb that mountain. It was slippery going in a lot of places, and he actually fell, twisted his knee at one point. I thought for sure the situation would be that he would have to be rescued by helicopter off the top of the mountain. But no. He made it to the top, and he took pictures of the mountainous terrain around him, the valley and everything. It was just gorgeous. And that climb really invigorated him. So he came back down the mountain, disassembled his swamp shelter, and then rebuilt it on drier ground. Now, by the 9th episode, Justin wasn't feeling challenged anymore. Like, he was eating fine, eating the large snails and the smaller periwinkles that he'd find on the shore. There were thousands of them. So he had absolutely, it wasn't a challenge at all to find adequate food for him where he was. And he had a source of water, and his camp was completed. So, he really had nothing left to do. And he was still working out, on the shores. And it just became no more of a challenge to him. And without that challenge in his life, the fun kind of went out of it as well. So while he was laying there, just bored out of his mind, he made a decision. A decision to change the way he lived his life, to pursue more challenges, to meet interesting people, because to him that was the fun. That was the whole essence of life. And of course, sitting on the shores all alone in Vancouver Island, he was feeling that he was wasting whatever time he might have left. You know, life is short, and you don't know from one day to the next how much time you have left. So instead of just sitting there and wasting his time, he decided to tap out. So Justin tapped out on episode 9, and he left to go pursue other adventures. So Justin, good luck to you, my friend. I wish you all the best. Now David, up until now, he's been having like a really rough time getting adequate food. So much so that he is now concerned about the amount of weight he's losing. The whole reason why David took this challenge on is because of his kids. He wants to provide a better life for them. And David is determined. He said that, how did he put it? He doesn't want to quit because he was hungry, or quit because he was wet or cold. Not when he was, that close or whatever to winning the grand prize and providing a much better life for his kids. So David's life is his kids, and so he's doing it for them. Now in episode 8, David mentioned these great big cedar logs that kept washing into his cove. Basically, the logs, when they wash in, like they wash in on the tide, and they would just absolutely decimate his gill nets. So gill net fishing was no longer an option, if it ever was, in that cove. So while David was out standing on the rocks, like the rocks here, I guess, he happened to look down into the water, and he saw some crabs, the large Dungeness crabs. And that reminded him of his childhood, when he would just dip a line above the crabs, and then the crabs, in their aggression, would grab a hold of the line, and then he would just pull them up. Easy, easy, easy. So David decided to give it a try. And sure enough, within, a matter of maybe half an hour, he had pulled up 6 huge Dungeness crabs. So his luck was changing. Instead of going hungry every day, now he could just easily pick up these crabs. So he was having a great day. And it was funny. He said, the only thing that would make this day better is if I had some beer and I was sharing it all with friends. So I think now his luck has changed, because he's figured out how to play that cove to make it produce food for him. So as in any survival situation where you have to provide food for yourself, it's important to look around and really study what's available and to exploit any food sources you might be able to come across. Now Larry, by episode 7, he was having a hard time finding enough fish to fill his pot. His gill nets and the lines he was setting out, they just weren't producing. So anyway, he did have a lot of mushrooms, chanterelles, that he could find. And he found this one, and it was so big. I've never seen a chanterelle that large. Like, I've heard of them being like this big. But that one was like the size of a loaf of bread. Like, it was a giant. And although it was probably a little past its best before date, there was still a considerable amount of mushroom flesh on there that he could eat. So he's been eating mushrooms, and he's been collecting limpets. Larry is the limpet man of season 2, I think. And the thing about limpets is that because they're animals, they're an important protein that you need for survival. But the thing about limpets is that they are very, very small, and so you do need a lot. So in one of the scenes that the producers decided to include in Larry's adventures, he collects a bunch of limpets and flips them out into his pan and says, you know, this is the smallest meal I've ever seen. So, you know, it takes a lot of limpets to fill you. Now, myself, I've never eaten a limpet, but I have eaten periwinkles. Those are the tiny little snails. And yeah, it does take a lot. Dozens and dozens to make a good meal. Now, the producers of The Alone Show didn't put any of Larry's footage into episode 8, so he's not featured there at all. But he's back in episode 9. And at the beginning of episode 9, Larry is able to get some small fish, and while he's doing that, he notices some smaller crabs sitting on top of the kelp. So, like David, he decides to dip for the crabs, and sure enough, you know, a crab, being as stupid as it is, crabs hold the line and just won't let go. So they're really easy to pull up. So Larry pulls up a few of those, has his fish in his pot as well, and heads back up to camp, you know, ready to cook this up. When he gets there, he notices that the Paiute deadfall that he's put on a stump had been tripped. So he goes over to investigate it, and when he pulls the rock back up from the deadfall, a mouse scurries away. So it didn't kill the mouse. So Larry, in his anger, grabs his spear and starts stabbing at this mouse that's trying to get away. Because he really doesn't want the mouse to be in his shelter, because that just drives him nuts, drives him right over the edge. So anyway, he chases this mouse, stabs it before it gets into a hole, and he said, then I slit his throat with my knife. Anyway, that was quite funny. So the next thing he does is he resets the Paiute trap and heads off to his camp in order to clean the mouse that he finally caught, and to cook up his fish as well. And just when he finishes cleaning the mouse, he hears his Paiute deadfall spring again. So heads back out to the stump to reset it, and there's another mouse under there. Well, this time the Paiute did its job of killing its prey. So now he's got 2. So he's quite excited about that. He said that he had practiced setting up the Paiute deadfall before, you know, like before the show. But he'd never actually caught anything with it. And so now he's quite proud of himself that he caught a mouse, you know. So he sets the Paiute deadfall up, heads back to his shelter, and before he can start cleaning that mouse, he hears a trip again, so he heads back out. Another mouse is caught in that deadfall. So he's beside himself, as far as being happy about the success of this deadfall. And anyway, over the course of the next few minutes, it shows that he set it again and again and again. And it keeps on producing mice. So at the end of that episode, he had, I believe it was 6 mice caught with that Paiute deadfall, plus a couple of crabs that he had dipped for, and I think a small fish. So he was going to eat well that night. So I think Larry's luck is changing. He's much happier about things now, and much happier about himself. The success of his deadfall, and just the fact that he's going to be eating well. So great for you, Larry. I have to change my position a little bit here. My foot's falling asleep. There we go. So now it's time to talk about Nicole. Well, the producers didn't feature her in episode 7 at all. So she shows up again in episode 8, and she's still living in harmony with the bears, and her gill net it's just in the absolute perfect spot, because it's been producing like crazy. Actually, it's been producing so well that she has to practice catch and release. She catches the salmon and releases it unharmed down the river a little ways, and that was just awesome to see. So God bless Nicole for not wasting the resources that are available to her. Catch and release, I can't, it's hard to believe when David was so hungry, and losing weight and everything. And, well, not only David, several of them, they were all hungry there for a while, trying to figure out their locations, trying to make them produce food. And here's Nicole, she seems to be in the ideal location. Well, ideal in the sense of food and resources, not so ideal in the sense of bears, I suppose, but they're leaving her alone, she's leaving them alone. There's enough food there for both of them to coexist. So catch and release. God bless her. Now, because of her knowledge of the plants that are available for both food and medicine, she's been eating like a queen up there. Balanced diet of greens and fish. So she's getting all her nutrients and eating, well, she's eating more now than she normally does. And so I think that she might be the only contestant in the Alone show that has ever put on weight while being out in the bush. So yeah, Nicole is doing really well. Now, in episode 9, again, the producers didn't feature her at all. So I'm expecting her to show up in the last 4 episodes for sure. So that leaves us with the final contestant, Jose. In episode 7, we see Jose working on his kayak, and he's using the steam and the heat method to bend the cedar ribs for his kayak. And then he inserts the ribs into slots that he's made in the gunnels. And then he lashes that all in place. Now, the thing about Jose is that he didn't bring any cordage with him. Cordage wasn't one of the things that he brought. He figured that he would either be able to manufacture cordage from the existing vegetation, or that he would find enough of it washed up on shore. And sure enough, there's a lot of cordage being washed up on shore over there. So he hasn't had any trouble with that. So like Justin, he was the only other person to bring a multi-tool as part of his 10-item kit. And anyway, he found a partially decomposing bone from some kind of an animal. I can't remember if they identified the animal on the show or not, but I seem to think it was like a sea lion, maybe a walrus. So it's a pretty good sized bone, and he takes his multi-tool and carves out a needle, probably about that size, complete with an eye, and he's going to use that to stitch up the tarp for the skin of his kayak. While he's working on his kayak, he says that all it's going to take is just one sharp barnacle rubbing against his tarp, and his chances on the show are over. Without being able to successfully build this kayak, he's not going to be able to get to a spot where he suspects the fish are running, the salmon are running. So everything is riding on this kayak. So by episode 8, Jose is starting to stitch together the tarp, which will form the skin of his kayak. And during that time, his thoughts wandered to his father, who taught him to work with his hands. And so he thanks his father for that knowledge, for that skill. And so as part of his kayak, to make it more robust, so it can, try to avoid punctures from the barnacles, he makes skid plates along the edges of where it would typically rub the life out of his tarp. And he attaches those to his tarp as well. Now, I'm not exactly sure how he stitched those in place. It looks like he stitched through the tarp itself. So if that is the case, then on the inside inside and outside, I guess, he would have had to put pine pitch or something there just to make it waterproof. And anyway, the editors, the producers of the show, don't show that one step, but otherwise I'm not really sure how he would have managed to fasten those skid plates onto his kayak. So at the beginning of episode 9, we see Jose finish his kayak and take it out on its maiden voyage. So he paddles out a little bit, probably, 10 meters, 10 yards out from shore, turns around and comes back in, and he finds it incredibly wobbly. Now, it's getting late in the fall, and he knows that if he upsets that kayak, that he could get hypothermia, in minutes. So it's incredibly important that he doesn't tip over. And he also realizes that if he's in the kayak and he wants to handle his net or handle lines or something like that, he's going to have to let go of his oar, his kayak paddle, and the weight of pulling in the net and stuff like that is going to be too much for that tippy kayak. So he decides to build outriggers, stabilizers with floats at the end, in order to make it a more stable fishing platform. Now, unfortunately, he only has one float, which is a big, it looks like a 2-gallon container that he found on the shore that he uses to carry fresh water in. So he's got that empty plastic container to act as a float, but he needs another float for the other side. So that night he prays. And he prays real hard that he'll find another float along the shore the next day. So the next day comes along and he's out beachcombing. And what does he find? He finds a nice foam float. And attached to the float is yards and yards of rope, all wrapped up to this piece of driftwood. It's like it was just placed there for him. And anyway, he can't believe his good fortune. You know, he's just overwhelmed that his prayers were answered in such a short order, really quickly. So with a lot of gratitude, he takes that other float and the rope that came with it, heads back to camp, and starts finishing the other pontoon, the other stabilizer for his kayak. And once that's done, then he takes it out again, and of course, it's much more stable. So now his next thing for him to do is to go across the bay to where he suspects the fish are running. So we'll have to wait until the next episode to see how well he does there. So now we're at the 5-week mark in the show, and we have 4 strong competitors, and they're all having successes. So their spirits are good. For the most part, they're well fed, and they're all optimistic about the weeks ahead. So barring any unforeseen circumstances, like injuries or hypothermia or, predator attacks, barring any of those things, those 4 contestants could be in it for the long haul. They could easily outlast the 50-odd days that season 1 lasted. So we have 4 episodes left in this season. And if it's anything like last season, the last couple of episodes, they skipped ahead quite far, a week or 2 at a time in order to get to the end. And, that may happen here as well. So I wish those 4 contestants the best of luck, and I'm really looking forward to watching the remaining 4 episodes. So until next time, this is Muskrat Jim, sitting on the shores of the Miramichi River. What a beautiful day. See you next time.
For more muskrat survival videos, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe.